We welcome in my friend Jerry Corsi, New York Times bestselling author, senior staff writer for WND.com, and the author of a great new book, What Went Wrong? The Inside Story of the GOP Debacle of 2012 and How It Can Be Avoided. Next time I hold that book up, for those of you watching at Newsmax.com, and those of you listening everywhere else, I urge you to get your hands on it. Hey, Jerry, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks. Congratulations on the promotion.
Well, thank you very much, and congratulations on the new book. I'm sure it's going to be another bestseller, as usual with you. And, boy, you and I go so far back. But I got to tell you, I don't know. Your book is fantastic, and I want you to give me your analysis. But I've been saying over and over and over again, until the Republicans do two things. First, understand that they're not only running against a Democratic presidential candidate, they're running against a media probably more detrimental to the Republican candidate than the Democratic candidate could ever be. And number two, stop running away from fights on abortion and social issues where the Republican candidate is probably in the mainstream. All they have to do is prove and talk about how far out of the mainstream to the left the Democratic candidate is. In 2012, Romney didn't do it. In 2008, McCain didn't do it. But you go even more in depth than that.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I think you're right. And I'd add to it that the Republicans have got to realize that they're up against a team of pros here, that Obama had really top computer guys. He had top media. The Obama people knew what they had to do to win, and which is essentially capture the urban vote in about a half a dozen states. And they knew who those voters were down to the person, and they knew how to get them to the polls. They had workers in the field that were communicating back to the Obama camp by iPhone and by iPad, very technologically sophisticated operation. And Republicans who are Me Too Democrats are just not going to succeed. That's a major point of my book.
Yeah, absolutely. And this ground game that the Obama campaign played so well twice is now heading over to Hillary for 2016. So they're going to have their hands full again if they don't adjust. How do the Republicans, as your book addresses, how do they avoid it in 2016, another debacle, as you put it?
Well, as I put, look at the analysis of the book, Steve, I show the real political science analysis. Remember, I'm a PhD in political science from Harvard. I've been studying voting behavior for a long time. I cite the analysts who designed the strategy for the Democrats. They knew down to the voter how many they had to get, where they were. The Republicans are going to realize the Democrats with Obama have engaged in a game-changing strategy. The Democrats think that they can put together a permanent electoral majority for the president, and they're doing it through classic, FDR-style interest group politics.
Right.
And identity politics, where African Americans voting 96% for Obama, Hispanics 77%. And if the Republicans say, we'll just pass an amnesty bill too, that's not going to appeal to Hispanics. Hispanics have got to be appealed to with a conservative message, a message that's distinct from the Democrats, and one that is equally well crafted and communicated by social media, by understanding the voters, profiling the voters, and getting a ground game in place. I mean, this is a brand new game. And I compare it to, when the Yankees were dominant even in the 60s, other teams thinking they could compete with the Yankees couldn't do it unless they realized that Steinbrenner was about to change the nature of the game. And he did. The Yankees dominated, and the Democrats are pursuing a similar kind of dominant strategy, and it can't be discounted. These are very smart guys who are running the Obama campaign.
We're talking to Jerry Corsi, the author of What Went Wrong, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. How is it possible? And I guess it's almost a rhetorical question because you've already answered it kind of with the ground game that the Obama administration had. But I mean, no one would have thought, and certainly as you point out in the book, the Romney people thought right up to Election Day itself, during Election Day, that even into the night, that they were going to win. Who would have suspected that a greater percentage or more minority vote, more Hispanic vote, would come out and vote for Obama than the first time around, when there was nothing but a lack of enthusiasm being reported in the months and weeks leading up to the actual vote?
Well, you're fighting. You're right. You're fighting a hostile media. But I traveled for 3 weeks with the Romney campaign on Romney's airplane. The last 3 weeks of the campaign, and it's discussed at great length in the book. Stuart Stevens, one of the top analysts for Romney, came back into the plane and he told me, flying back to Boston for the returns that day on Election Day, that a good message, which they thought they crafted for Romney, was going to beat the ground game. And I'm looking at Stuart Stevens and saying, not today. Not when you've got look at what the Obama people have done with the NSA, the National Security Agency. These are people who know how to micro-target voters based on massive crunching of data. And they're very sophisticated. And then they craft their message for Obama to fit the profiles of the voters they're going after.
Well, wait. Are you saying that somehow government spying, NSA, that kind of thing was I don't want to say hijacked, but I'll say used by the Obama campaign to help in targeting of voters, et cetera?
Well, I can't prove that they shifted the data over from the NSA, but they used the same techniques.
Okay.
They may not have been able to listen into everybody's phone, but once they got finished profiling Facebook and all the other social media, and then bought massive databases, the Democrats were buying huge databases from credit cards. They knew what magazines you read. They knew what television shows you watched. And they were running sophisticated computer models to profile voters, and it was every bit as sophisticated as the NSA was doing, run by many of the same guys, the same computer wizards. This is a game-changing event in presidential politics.
All right, but Jerry, so can the Republicans adopt to this? Can the Republicans get in on the game in time for 2016, or is it pass them by and they don't really know how to do it?
Well, they're probably going to try to get on the train, but you've got Boehner and the others thinking that if they just capitulate, and I compare this to what was going on in the 50s when you had the Nelson Rockefeller Republicans who thought they could just compete with the Democrats by the same message. Romney was so centrist in so many of his politics that a lot of white voters, and Romney lost because a lot of white voters stayed home. They just decided a lot of conservative voters. Romney got the evangelicals. What he didn't get was the conservatives who wanted a choice, not an echo with what the Democrats were saying.
Yeah, and I was remiss because when I also asked you how is it possible that more people turned out, more Obama voters that I thought were disinterested or not as passionate the second time around certainly came out, but also I was going to ask you, and it slipped my mind, what happened to the base? A lot of the base stayed home for Romney.
Well, and the base was saying, okay, look at the big issues. Romney, Obamacare, which was tremendously unpopular, should have been pounded. But, then the Democrats come back to Romney and they say, well, you did Romney care.
Right.
Well, unless Romney could really explain that issue and get into it, Benghazi, Romney dropped all of the issues about the war on terror because he didn't want to fight or appear to fight. They were riding on a lead. The only time Romney was ahead was after the first debate when he challenged Obama.
And then he thought he could coast. Listen, Jerry, we're up against the clock, top of the hour. The book, folks, What Went Wrong? The Inside Story of the GOP Debacle of 2012, How It Can Be Avoided Next Time. Must reading from WND Books from our friend Jerry Corsi. Jerry, thank you, my friend.
Always an honor and pleasure.